So Doug and Rick, can you check? I think we're on Facebook.
I got a message saying it's being live streamed. It usually takes a few seconds to buffer, and it is happening now. Yes, we are live.
Thank you very much, Doug. Mahalo for joining Kokua Council today. Kokua Council is one of Hawaii's oldest advocacy organizations. Collectively, we're known as Kokua Council, but we're also active within other organizations, including AARP Hawaii, Alzheimer's Association, the Condo Owners Coalition of Hawaii, the Green Wheel Food Hub, the Hawaii Alliance for Retired Americans, Hawaii Family Caregivers Coalition, Hawaii Meals on Wheels, Hawaii Pacific Gerontological Society, Hui Oiaio, the Policy Advisory Board for Elder Affairs in the state's Executive Office on Aging, Pono Hawaii, the Rotary, and many other community-minded organizations. Today, our guests are advocates from Kokua Council's community and our state legislators. As we discuss these legislative priorities, we ask that you think of the people for whom these advocates speak. Our guest advocates are grouped into 3 segments, and after every segment, the floor will be open for discussion. In the first segment, our guests are John McDermott, Kealii Lopez, and Audrey Suga-Nakagawa. John McDermott has been our state long-term care ombudsman for the past 23 years. With plans to retire in 2 years, John asked for 5 ombudsman's positions for the neighbor islands and 1 more for Oahu. This way, he'll have time to recruit and train them before his retirement. Kealii Lopez will address a program known as Hawaii Saves. Kealii is the state director of AARP, and she'll be followed by her colleague, Audrey Suga-Nakagawa, who is AARP's advocacy director and will be addressing connectivity. So let's start with John, followed by Kealii, then Audrey, and then open up for discussion. Go ahead, John. John, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay, yes. Good morning, everybody. Thank you. Can I share my screen? Is that all right?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So can folks see my slideshow starting from the beginning? Okay, you can all see that?
Not seeing it.
Not seeing it. My side says that it's on. So, okay, you can't see it. I apologize. Okay, well then I'll just, I won't use the PowerPoint. I don't know if it's working. Some of you probably heard my presentation on Friday when I was a guest speaker at the caucus. And, this will be, I guess, a little bit different. As Lila mentioned, I intend to retire in 2 years when I'll have 25 years with the state. And I do remember back when I first started, I replaced Michael Ragsdale as the long-term care ombudsman. And he had already left the job and that position was vacant for about 6 months. And so when I came on board, there was nobody to teach me how to be an ombudsman. I had never heard of the word ombudsman, so I really did not know what I was supposed to do. But luckily, I did have 2 years working at Maunalani Nursing Home, 7 years working at Halinani Rehab Nursing, so 9 years in long-term care. So I knew that side of the story, what facilities have to go through. And as a social worker, I always saw my job as an advocate for the residents anyway. So it wasn't really a difficult transition, but there's just a lot of things that you have to pick up. And there is, of course, a learning curve. This program started as a demonstration project in 1975. It became federal law in 1978, and it became state law in 1979. And the National Institute on Medicine has always said that you should have at least 1 full-time ombudsman for every 2,000 residents. We now have in the state almost 13,000 residents, and we have a staff of me. I have a volunteer coordinator, and that's it, a staff of 2. And so I've come here before asking for these positions, but now I'm really desperate because I need these people in place in order to train them. The recruitment process is fairly lengthy. In 2017, I was very grateful that the legislature gave us funding to hire on a part-time basis, $75,000 for part-time on Kauai, a part-time on Maui, a part-time on the Big Island, and then $75,000 to restore full-time the Oahu position, which I've had since this program began. But in 2015, the EO director at that time eliminated the position, and that's when I became Officer 1. So we were very, very fortunate that the legislature approved that. And in fact, I vividly recall that Representative Luke said that you're totally forgetting about an operating budget. So you need a little bit more than that, and threw in another $6,000 or $7,000. So that was really perfect timing because COVID really changed the landscape, and a lot of our volunteers were not comfortable going into facilities. And at one point they weren't allowed to go into facilities. And so we really had to rely on contractors to check on our residents and find out how they were doing. And one example of just how important this role is, Jackie Gardner was our ombudsman on the Big Island, and the care homes and foster homes are having a real difficult time getting PPEs, weren't getting a lot of help from the Department of Health. And so Jackie on her own got the PPEs mailed to her and hand delivered them. She drove to all the facilities on the Hilo side of the Big Island so that they would have some PPEs to protect themselves and to protect their residents. So since this program began, the neighbor islands have been waiting basically 42 years for their own ombudsman, and that really doesn't make any sense at all. We're supposed to provide a minimum of once a quarter visit, according to the Federal Administration on Community Living. So for one person to go to 6 islands, quarterly visits is 29 a day, not at all possible. So we desperately need these positions filled. When the legislature gave us the funding in 2017 for the Oahu position, 4 years later, that position was only posted about 2 weeks ago. So that's how long it took to get that process completed. And so we cannot move that slow. It just doesn't make any sense. So if this bill were passed, it would basically go into effect July of 2022. And if the Department of Health were able to put it on the fast track, it would probably take a year. So that would be 2023 to do the classification and work with the neighbor island Department of Health district offices in terms of housing these positions, a lot of things that have to be done. And so if that's July of 2023 and my anniversary is August of 2023, there's no way that I could hire and train people in 1 month. I certainly would be willing to stay an extra year to do that if we get these positions. But I've been asking this for so long. And like I said, the neighbor islands have been waiting 42 years. COVID made things much more complicated. Airfare, airlines weren't flying. Rental cars are very difficult to get. We need local people who, in addition to going to the facilities on a regular basis, can be part of the family council, part of the resident council, do complaint investigations that might take multiple trips, investigate complaints about issues that might be happening in the evening, help with recruiting volunteers through local clubs, getting support from the county council, from the local mayors, those kinds of things. I cannot do that here from Oahu. And so I apologize about the PowerPoint not working, but I did send that to Lila. And so hopefully she can send that to all of you who are listening in so that you'll have a copy of that. Thank you.
Kealii, you're next, please.
Aloha, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to present to the council and your guests. Quickly, I'm going to try to see if I can share my screen as well. And hope that works. Can you folks see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things that AARP has been advocating for a few years now has been the desire to address what we see as retirement saving issues. And this has been a matter across the country that AARP has been involved in. One of the things that we especially are concerned about, I'm trying to make sure I can advance this. Okay. Has been the issue of a retirement crisis. And the fact is that many Americans, and Hawaii's no different, have not saved for retirement. So on average, a household has maybe 2,500 saved for retirement. Those who are getting closer to retirement have maybe saved about a little over 14,000. In addition to that, you know, income that they have from Social Security really doesn't cover the costs, and especially in a state like Hawaii where we have such a high cost of living. On average, maybe getting an income of close to $1,500 a month or close to $18,000 a year in Social Security. However, on average, just for a single individual, the cost is over $32,000. And that's just for food, utilities, and healthcare and housing. That's not for extravagant entertainment and such. What we also see is that very few people are planning for retirement. So only about 39% of workers nationally give any thought to retirement planning. And then those who are who have workplace retirement are more likely to save. So on average, many employees do not have access to retirement savings or pension through their work. And so what that means is so many people aren't saving, because what you'll see here is for those who don't have retirement savings through work, only about 1 in 20 people will actually go out on their own to open up an IRA or retirement savings vehicle of some sort. So this past year, the legislature agreed to pass resolution to start up a retirement task force to look at what this could mean for Hawaii, looking at what some of the examples are out there. So there's an auto IRA approach, which is a public-private partnership, creates a low-cost, easy way for small businesses in particular to be able to provide a mechanism for their employees to save through their paycheck. Another one that's out there and used has been approved in some states or passed in some states, creates an online marketplace, kind of like a state-approved kayak for retirement saving vehicles in that particular case. One of the things that the task force is looking at, and by the way, Senator Taniguchi and Representative Onishi are non-voting members on that task force and have been heavily involved in the work of the task force. So there's this includes information for a couple of the programs here in the states. So primarily Oregon, Illinois, and California are the states that were able to get up an auto IRA program within their states. So they've enrolled about 38,000 employers, and across those they've funded 41,000 accounts, and have those employees have set aside $333 million in savings. What we see in the marketplace, though, is that even though the threshold is lower, very few employers have participated. A few accounts have been set up, and the savings is much lower. So one of the things that the task force and AARP have done is some research with regards to folks here in Hawaii. So this is specific to research done by SMS and AARP. And what it shows is that small businesses and their employers are absolutely highly interested and strongly support the creation of a Hawaii retirement savings program. So the darker one are the businesses. AARP surveyed well over 300 small businesses, and that's basically any employer that had 5 to 100 employees. And then the other are basically employees here in Hawaii. The focus there was on employees that didn't already work for the government or have facilitation in some of those areas. So overall, businesses and employees are very interested in some kind of way to make it easier to save for the future. So I'm going to cover a little bit real quick. I'll try to wrap up real fast. On the state facilitated retirement savings, the point would be that the state would provide a mechanism for small businesses or businesses in general to provide a retirement savings program by having these employees and small businesses pool together. Clearly, those businesses that are already providing retirement or pensions for their employees would not participate in this. And what's the important part and critical piece about this is that it's a payroll deduction. The degree to which employees are able to save prior to getting the paycheck, they're automatically enrolled, meaning they have to opt out. And that's also been proven to be a very effective strategy. And there's potentially an escalation over time with regards to how much they might contribute to their own retirement plan. And the piece about that, again, is the pooling. So talked about that. In fact, I got it in there twice. It's so important. And then, of course, the concept is ideally the issue of saving taxpayer dollars for the future. And then this was a PowerPoint shared with Audrey, so definitely want you to contact her. So the concept is, although the work is still being done, we're estimating that the savings to taxpayers will be $1 to $2 billion over a 30-year period of time, meaning people will be able to save for retirement and not have to be dependent on public benefits that we have seen many of our kupuna have to rely on, especially during the pandemic. And that's it. I'll be happy to take any questions unless you want to deal with that later, Lila.
Yeah, we're going to do it after the first segment,
Okay.
which will be after Audrey. So Audrey, can you give us your presentation? Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. I'm Audrey Suga-Nakagawa. I'm Advocacy Associate Director with AARP. And what I'm going to be talking about is the Broadband Digital Inclusion Roadmap project that AARP is also embarking in. So I'm going to pull up my screen. And I hope everyone can see this. So AARP, along with many of those that are in the audience today, are members of the Broadband Hui. And we really saw an important need for more and more of our kupuna to be actively engaged and use the broadband or the internet because of how important it has become in terms of communication and being able to access the different kind of benefits that now have gone online, especially during this pandemic. And so thanks to a small grant that was awarded from the national office, Hawaii was among the 7 states that was given a grant to engage in a project like this. And so what we have been working with, we had engaged Hawaii Public Health Institute to help us in this project. And we have been working on developing a digital inclusion roadmap as well as a digital resource directory. The digital inclusion roadmap was really a strategic plan that would do an asset mapping of what the current services and resources that we have in terms of broadband for our kupuna. And then it also was looking at the gaps. Where were the disparities? Where were the pukas in our system where our seniors are not able to connect or use the broadband as broadly as they should? And then finally, it also is identifying the possible solutions and projects and services that could be looked into and developed, especially as the infrastructure budget that is coming down from the federal government would be a great opportunity for us to have these projects prioritized and be able to secure the funding for that. So this was a really important project that we needed to engage in, especially at this time. Some of the highlights of this particular roadmap show some research, and we found that the adults in Hawaii, there's about 88% between the age of 18 and 64 who are connected. They're either using a computer, a smart device, tablets, and have broadband subscription. However, for our senior population, 65 years and older, 73% of them are getting engaged. So it's not too bad, but definitely there's big room for growth in this with our population. And then we also looked at, how does this break down in terms by county? And you can see Hawaii County has the largest percentage of seniors who are not connected with the computer or broadband, followed by Maui, then by Kauai, and then of course, Honolulu is at 13.8%. We had the Hawaii Public Health Institute, as they were doing their research, they were also conducting listening sessions with our kapuna and with providers who are working with many of the seniors in this particular area. And this one, when they did this statewide, and these were some of the areas of barriers that they were identifying, that there's definitely an internalized ageism, a fear of technology among our older residents. Many of them have complained about inadequate access to broad internet. And we can see this especially in the rural communities. The Big Island residents were very vocal about the difficulty of having access to reliable internet connections. Then the issue of affordability, whether it's to be able to provide or purchase the device themselves or to be able to pay the monthly subscription. For many of our seniors who are on fixed income, this may become a luxury for them to do this. And of course, there was a fear of cyber safety. And so, they hear horror stories from people who have been hacked. And so they are very leery and want to be very careful if they would be engaged in using the internet far more. The things that they also had said was that they would be definitely more engaged if there was a really good support network. So many of them rely on their children, other friends and peers to help them support them so that they could use this more. And then of course, they see the value of being connected, especially being able to connect with their friends and families remotely. And then finally, they said that they would do it more. They would be much more engaged if they was instructed in classes and in technical support. So these are some of the things that the seniors were responding in our listening session. Now, the second part of this particular project was to develop a digital resource directory, basically a really simple to use reference directory. And we couldn't find anything that was really done yet. And so we also used this time to create a directory, and that basically it would be something that they could find, like where are the digital classes that are available in my community. And right now we do know that the community colleges are offering classes, adult education classes, in training people how to use the computer. We also know that the library is also having some tech support. So this is the kind of information that we wanted to put into this directory. And then people are saying, where can I buy a refurbished computer or something that's affordable? And so again, we are identifying the organizations that provide these type of resources. And then, things like how to pay for high-speed internet. So this is a directory that we are putting together, and both of this will be completed by the end of December. And so what we're hoping is that once the document, if both the roadmap and the research directory is finalized, we're going to be sharing this with our aging network and with the legislatures, but we really want this to be a very important and useful tool and resource for us to look and prioritize projects that can be implemented or funded, applied for funding, whether it comes from the Fed or from the legislature. Also looking for potential legislation that we may need to help ease the connectivity for our kapuna, so that they would be better connected as well as learn to use our technology much more efficiently. So that's basically the overview of this particular project. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Regarding our three speakers, do we have any comments or inquiries from our audience? Go ahead, Senator Moriwaki.
Hi, good morning, and thank you, Kokua Council. I do, Audrey, I think that digital networking and broadband is really important, as we found during the pandemic. And I'm just wondering, so this project or your study from the Public Health Institute is going to come up with recommendations for legislation as well as funding, or do you have something in mind now that's going forward for the coming session?
No, so right now there's no very specific legislation, but definitely ideas and projects that could be potentially funded or potentially legislation. So there might be some language in there or suggestions that this is, perhaps the legislature may want to consider this particular legislation that would help them enable to process or have more connectivity. So we it's part of the listening sessions as we went out to talk with all the kapunas and all the network providers. They also gave some of their ideas, and we're compiling that into this document so that you can look at that as reference.
So I'm just thinking in terms of timing wise though. So if we are looking at legislation coming in by the beginning of January or mid-January, it really, I don't know if your time frame of having the report by the end of the year is something that is too quick for this coming session.
Yeah, and we had this project awarded to us right in September. And so we were under a really tight time crunch, to get this out. We may have the electronic form by the mid-December, but, we have to, it took just so long, to get everything. So, Senator, I'm hoping that whatever information that we have would be something that would be easy for you to lift right away and provide it as an introduction for the legislation if that is needed.
Let us know, and you can report maybe to the our Kupuna caucus.
Absolutely.
What your results are. Yes. Thank you. Good project.
All right, any more inquiries or comments? All right,
Leila, I just have one. Leila, I just
Sure.
have one. It's Kealii here. Doubling back, and I mentioned this at the Kupuna caucus, but I think one of the things that will be really helpful to look at with regards to the long-term care ombudsman is the degree to which fees that are collected in the licensing of nursing homes, adult residential care homes, all of those licensed operators, there has to or should be a way that the fees that are collected can be utilized to fund those ombudsman's positions. I realize it's also used to fund perhaps Keith Ridley's staff and whomever else. I'm not sure what those fees are, but hoping that any legislator who's really interested in ensuring these positions can be funded and established would look at that kind of licensing regime to pay for the ombudsman positions.
I'd like to respond to that, Kealii. Thank you. We did not bring it up, but we do have it on our list in Kupuna caucus is to assist the Office of Healthcare Assurance to lift their cap right now. It is, their funding can be used for education outreach. And so looking at how we might use some of their special fund, because it's very closely tied with the long-term care ombudsman in the sense of, if the long-term care ombudsman sees there's a problem, there really could be a flip into looking at more investigation by the Office of Healthcare Assurance. So I think that kind of synergy is there. I did bring it up a couple of years ago, and because their funding was pretty limited, we didn't look at the coordination, how that some of the funds could be used to help the ombudsman. On the other hand, I think that it's really important that the state make a commitment that we really should have ombuds people on the neighbor islands as well as Oahu, because if you look at 13,000 nursing homes or facilities, we really should make a commitment that this is important. So state funds should be there to support the program. I think it's a really important program, and it's a cheap program when you look at nursing homes and all the problems with that. To have people there to assist the elderly, who a lot of them have no family to support them. So it's really important for them to have trust in someone that's there on island. So I think we really need to look at that this year. So thank you, John, and thank you for all of your volunteers as well. But we will have to look at supporting the neighbor islands. If it's 42 years, oh my goodness, that's a long time to wait. So yeah. So thank you, Kealii, for bringing that up. We'll need to look at how we can fund that, but make sure that it is a long-term commitment to long-term care.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to recognize Representative Perruso.
Thank you. So I wanted to circle back to the conversation around digital access or internet access with Audrey. And I wanted to ask, I know that we've had these national conferences of state legislators, and it's come up multiple times that California was just recently able to pass a law requiring ISPs to share their data, which then saves the state a lot of trouble in duplicating that effort. It seems like what we see in the public schools, looking at that same problem with lack of access in many communities, is that the ISPs are claiming coverage, and we know actually on the ground there isn't coverage. So I'm wondering if you have considered that or looked at legislation that's been passed recently by other states on this issue.
I have not per se, but nevertheless, we do have Bert Lum, who is the state lead strategist for the state. He's part of our steering committee. And so, I'm hoping, I haven't seen the final report yet. We're still in the draft form, but I'd like to see whether some of those things are included in the recommendations in the report. So, this is a conversation that we continuously have to have with our broadband providers that are part of the broadband HUI. And then we would like to have some of that put into the report as well.
Thank you. And thank you for your work on this.
Perruso?
Everybody.
Sure, Rep. Perruso, I just wanted to add one more thing, is on a national level, AARP National is working with the FCC or engaging on different dockets related to the issue that you're addressing right now. So if we can get more information about that, we'll definitely forward it to whichever legislators have an interest in that particular proceeding.
That's great. I'm really interested in that because I think it benefits everybody.
All right, thank you very much. More than half a century ago, Eleanor Roosevelt recognized that universal human rights begin in the small places close to home. The next group of advocates address challenges to their rights in the small places close to home. One of our advocates is identified as condo owner. She'll be first, then Jeff, then Dale, then Lourdes, in the same order. Please introduce yourselves and what you're advocating, and then the floor will open for discussion. So let's start off with condo owner.
Mahalo. Thank you for letting me testify today. I'm testifying on urgently needed revisions to HRS 514B, Hawaii's condominium law, to end the abuse of power by condo boards, property management companies, and condo association attorneys. These individuals and entities have the power to manipulate the election system so that incumbent board members retain office in perpetuity with no accountability to their fellow owners. This has resulted in embezzlement of association funds, award of association contracts to favored people and companies, and other abuses that harm condo owners to whom the board members should have and do have a legal fiduciary duty. When owners discover and question such abuses, they become the victims of targeted retaliation. There are hundreds of verifiable stories here in Hawaii of condo owners being the victims of such abuse. Often the attorneys representing the associations are the worst offenders. They rack up fees by issuing fines for bogus violations, and the condo owner must pay not just the fine, but the legal fees as well. In the past, hundreds of Hawaii residents lost their condos through foreclosure due to this tactic. While the foreclosure threat is diminished because of a recent revision to the law, the retaliatory fines, threats, and legal fees continue unabated. This is because the provisions of 514B that are meant to protect condo owners such as the anti-retaliation provision, are unenforceable. DCCA and RICO say they are powerless to enforce them since condo associations are self-governing entities that elect their own leaders, which brings us back full circle to the election abuse issue. The current mediation and arbitration provisions meant to resolve disputes at a low cost to condo owners have a fatal flaw. They're drafted so the condo association controls the process. The choice to engage in mediation is voluntary, so the association can just refuse. Even if it agrees, the association attorney controls the selection of mediator by refusing to mediate unless their chosen mediator is used. The same is true for arbitration. You can review the mediation outcomes, many if not most of which list a no agreement result, to see how little effective relief this provides the condo owner. Meanwhile, after the no agreement result, the retaliation escalates. This problem exists nationwide. Many states, especially those with a high percentage of condos, have taken action to protect homeowners. Hawaii has not, despite the fact that home prices leave condos as the sole option for many Hawaii residents. Hawaii condo owners include both local residents and investors, but it is the local residents who vote and pay taxes in Hawaii who are suffering. Legislators need to serve their people and enact common sense protections into law. The following 5 changes to 514B are urgently needed and long overdue. First, meaningful reform of the election process for condo boards. This means direct elections instead of the proxies that allow boards to retain power. By direct elections, I mean ballots sent to all owners with the names of all candidates. Owners must then be allowed to send their ballot in by mail or participate in and cast their ballot at the annual election meeting online via Zoom or another electronic platform. This would immediately increase owner participation in meetings and annual elections and would provide a transparent and documented means of voting. Further, management companies must not be allowed to preside over the vote count. A third-party election certifier could be used if necessary. Second, create a condo ombudsman's office with funding and legal staff trained in 514B to resolve disputes between condo owners and their boards at no cost. States with many condo associations, including California and Florida, have some version of this. This would replace the mediation and arbitration provisions, which are controlled by the association attorneys. Third, licensure of property managers with standards of conduct and enforcement authority by RICO or another entity. Enforcement provisions must include the power to revoke licenses for violations of the standards of conduct. Fourth, increased oversight of association attorneys who engage in retaliation against owners in violation of 514B. This means a dedicated staff at the Office of Disciplinary Counsel with full authority to discipline and or disbar attorneys who act in violation of 514B and their own professional and ethical standards. And the planned community carve out to the state law capping attorneys' fees at 25% of damages needs to be eliminated. Finally, mandatory training of board members on 514B to be repeated every year a member remains on the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff, you're up next.
Okay, thank you very much, Lila, for putting this together and all of your efforts. And thank you, everybody, for making time to participate as well today. My name is Jeff Sadino. I purchased a condo in 2017 in an average sized association with an average condo value of about 400,000. So very typical across the board. And what I have observed over the past 4 years is a lot of abuse and unethical behavior by the condo boards and managing agents against owners. If I had to describe the situation as a whole, I would say that condo boards, managing agents, and attorneys are engaging in behaviors that focus on making the problems that they have with condominium owners worse, instead of focusing on behaviors that focus on getting to a solution. So for this upcoming session, I would ask for your support to support bills that disincentivize behaviors that make problems worse. I think there are two very effective ways to do this. The first is to increase the accountability of managing agents. The second is to stop the over-reliance on attorneys by getting rid of 100% reimbursement of attorney charges. There are lots of different examples that I could give to illustrate this, but I'll give one that I think is very applicable to today. In my association, we had a senior couple who ended up losing their home because of incredibly excessive fines and penalties and late charges. So this couple, seniors in their 70s, on a fixed income, English was not their first language, their health was deteriorating and partially disabled. And what happened with them is, on a temporary basis, they fell behind on paying their maintenance fees. And then the association started charging egregious late charges that created a downward spiral of debt that they were never able to get out from. So this is basically their ledger from 2017. In our association, our maintenance fee is $400 a month, $411. And you can see here, as of December 11th, 2017, the owners actually were paying their maintenance fees. So they were cooperating with their condo board. They were trying to focus on the solution, but the condo board and the managing agent and the attorneys were engaging in behaviors that only made the problem worse. For example, here, in just 1 month, my condo board assessed this senior couple almost $1,000 in late charges every single month. How is that ethical to do to somebody who is on a fixed income? And what problem is that helping to solve? All it is doing is punishing them in a way that is impossible to recover from. It creates a downward spiral of debt that nobody could get out of. If we fast forward the following year, again, maintenance fee $430. Again, the condo owners are paying it. They are trying to be cooperative. They are trying to focus on the solution. But the condo board and the managing agent and the law firms are focusing on behaviors that make the problem worse. Here, 1 year later, the late charges getting charged $1,500 a month. How is that ethical to do to somebody on a fixed income? And why is the managing agent, the supervisors there, allowing this type of behavior to continue? How come they're not tapping the brakes on this? The owners are cooperating. They are paying into their maintenance fee fund. And so you can see, just in 1 year, their late charges, they owe $15,000 in late charges on a $10,000 balance. And calling back to Ms. Lopez's presentation, where she said that the average couple has $14,000 in savings. What this shows is that my condo board extracted a lifetime worth of savings from this couple in 1 year for absolutely no reason. They were paying their maintenance fees. And if you actually do this calculation, $1,500 late charges on a $10,000 balance, that comes out to 180% interest rate. Those are gangster-like interest rates. And we're doing this to seniors. This is happening in my association. It is happening in every association that I have looked at. I bring this up now because of coronavirus. I think it is a certainty that in the immediate future, a lot of people are going to temporarily fall behind on their maintenance fees. And I'm worried that a lot of these people are going to, start down this downward spiral of this debt that they are never going to be able to get away from. And so this couple, again, seniors on a fixed income, do not speak English, partially disabled, and now they're homeless. And now they have no money. What are they supposed to do now? And the most frustrating part is it's completely preventable. They were paying their maintenance fee. Why punish them like this? So this is one owner. This is another owner in our association. Again, same thing, $27,000 in late charges. How is that ethical? What problem is that helping to solve? So I wanted to talk about attorney fees, but I'm running out of time. But I'll just summarize my situation. In the 4 years that I've been here, my condo board has filed 2 different lawsuits against me, and they have accrued $175,000 in attorney fees to me. And for that, they have absolutely nothing to show for it. The only thing they have to show is that the courts dismissed their first lawsuit and the second lawsuit is still pending. So I'll just conclude here by asking for your support to support bills this upcoming session that disincentivize these bad and unethical behaviors that make problems worse. And to do that, we need to increase the accountability of managing agents, and we need to stop the over-reliance on attorneys by getting rid of 100% reimbursement of attorney charges. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Dale, you're up.
Okay, gang, can you hear me? Hello,
Yes.
my name is Dale Head. I'm talking to you this morning from Moanalua Valley, which I moved into recently after residing in a Makaha condominium for about 35 years. For over 10 years, I was on its board of directors. And over the past few years, made many trips into our capital to testify on condo bills. For a few minutes here, I will speak to the very serious problem of voting rights suppression as it exists in homeowner associations, also known simply as HOAs, which include condos that now house perhaps half of the state population. The cognizant Hawaii Revised Statute for HOAs specifies that an owner must be physically present at an annual meeting in order to cast their own vote. And as a metric, although presently we have 121,000 condo units in Hawaii, as 70% of them are investor owned, a huge majority of these folks are blocked from voting as they cannot attend the meeting on site. While the state insists HOAs are self-governing, that term is premised upon fair and equal voting rights. Yet the statute denies that right to many thousands of HOA owners who, by the way, like everyone else, pay taxes. This curious situation sets the stage for much mischief, driven by unchecked hunger for profits from those privately owned management companies, which both handle owners' monies and get to running elections as they wish to. Surely this is a major conflict of interest. As most folks on fixed incomes know full well, any increases they receive are tied to Social Security, which is linked to inflation. When we don't have significant inflation occurring, payment boosts are minuscule to none at all. And yet property managers ask usually for an amount 4 or 5 times higher than fixed income adjustments. This has the cumulative effect over time. Available disposable income is decreased to where people make the hard choice between food or medicine. Surely this feeds into a higher cost of living, making Hawaii unaffordable for many. Census statistics show our Hawaii population has been shrinking as home prices have surged amazingly high to more than $1 million per house. $500 million now. I'm sorry. I can't control the neighbor's dog. This large majority of HOA owners, having been deprived of casting their own votes, are urged to transfer them to the board as a whole via a simple form, which also offers a few other options. As these disenfranchised people are blocked from participating, usually they do indeed transfer them. However, the managing agent in truth receives all of those absentee owners' votes and wrongfully cloaks them in secrecy. Only those assigned to individuals are released to them. At the annual meeting, a property manager does not reveal to most board members or attendees how many votes he or she controls, while the official minutes of such a meeting make no mention of that specific category. They have usually been awarded in secrecy to almost always incumbents of the manager's choosing. This happens even when those specially favored candidates may have the lowest number of votes from absentee owners. But upon receiving a windfall from the manager, they are now announced to have won re-election. This intrigue shuts out candidates who, having had more support from owners before the meeting begins, are now declared to have lost and not been elected. This cold and calculated policy of creating manufactured elections leads to other related issues, such as disdain for anyone who dares to question the intrigue, and guarantees retaliation against them for having done so, as they are deemed a threat to long-established policy. Big profits, folks. By stacking the board with selected candidates in this manner, generally there is no concern about having to endure competitive bids from other companies, as none are solicited, which is precisely why the intrigue is perpetrated. Then to a puppet board tends to easily grant multiple assessment proposals and inflate monthly fees increases, which greatly exceed pension adjustments. Surely the situation of voting rights suppression must be corrected, even though it has been in place for decades. During the last legislative session, bills introduced by Senator Moriwaki and Representatives Johansson, Kitagawa, and Saiki seemed to ameliorate challenges of isolation inflicted on citizens' movements caused by COVID. The intent was to accord people in HOAs the right to vote by mail and modern internet means, but only during a declared county emergency or pandemic. The bill was approved and then signed into law this past June 24th by Governor David Ige as Act 83. However, this critical information has not been shared with owners and therefore does not remedy the problem. Any legislator who thought the management companies would do so is engaging in wishful thinking. As the old adage goes, better late than never when it comes to fixing a problem. Recently, I've asked Donna Mercado Cam and Linda Ichiyama to work up and introduce a bill for the next session to make usage of modern voting methods permanent rather than temporary. This will go far to correct multiple abuses which now flourish. But importantly, this matter must be dealt with where it began. I ask any legislators viewing this to insist on a hearing of both our House and Senate authorizing HOA voting by mail, online, and by telephone to specialty companies that do that. Due to time constraints, I cannot today go into the myriad abuses being committed against HOA owners. Many horror stories out there. The state, in my opinion, has been complicit in allowing for this due to their failure to establish an office of ombudsman and fund it to deal with these outrages. Leadership by legislators is needed to establish and protect full voting rights and homeowner associations. Some thought should be given to barring companies from both handling monies and also conducting elections, which puts them in an unethical conflict of interest situation. Thank you. Focus.
Thank you, Dale. Oh, thank you, Dale. Lourdes? You have to unmute yourself.
Hi, Senator Moriwaki and Speaker Saiki. Both are my representatives for Kaka'ako area. As the other three people, I can tell you that I have experienced almost each and every presentation that they have described. I really believe that in self-governance of condominiums, the building block of really bad elections is the proxy as a whole made on the basis of the preference of the majority directors present at the meeting. And that gives an advantage year after year of the same directors directing the costs and the reserves and deferred maintenance that has brought us here today with 350 condos that are struggling even to make the mandate for the fire sprinkler system, including my unit. I'm 70 years old. I own my own unit at Royal Court. And my plan was to retire here happily with Straub Clinic and my entertainment across the street, all of those afforded to somebody like me who's getting much older and I can walk to these areas. That was my dream and intention to leave this condo to my daughter, my granddaughter, because I believe that the property is very well built, bar none. But because of this proxy, it has remained the majority of the board members that defer all of these maintenance, that it has come to today where assessment will come down. Absolutely, I know this. I've been in banking. I have 35 plus years in construction maintenance in working for the military. So I know what's going on behind the walls of a condominium. But in 2019, I'm very happy to say that Speaker Saiki and supported HB 347, and it did pass the House to make it to consumer protection. Okay, so in the history, although the Judiciary Committee, the House Judiciary Committee report affirmed it is in accord with the intent and purpose of HB 347, the House Committee on Consumer Protection and Commerce report amended the measure by changing its effective date to July 1st, 2050 to promote further discussion. So today, I believe discussion should continue and ask that this amendment to delete this proxy option be resubmitted for consideration on 2022 legislation and beg for your support. Abuse of this proxy is often used, and you can see examples by testimony by Jeffrey, condo owner, and by Dale, and I can say they are spot on. Abuse does happen, and I think the building block of this abuse is to allow the use of this proxy. I believe discussion should continue. Abuse of this proxy is often used, and it just happens. My board decided to put it in writing. So I did send an email this morning to Speaker Saiki. Attached to my letter was my condo newsletter to the owners on page 2. It says, please give your proxy to the duly elected board as a whole to ensure that your vote is represented in a fair and objective manner. When you give up your proxy, you are giving your voting rights away. Royal Court has a duly elected board that represent the owners for building related decisions. The board's job is to make decisions for the good of the building and its owners without prejudice or individual agenda. We ask you to give proxy to the board and not to individuals who may use your vote for personal reasons without your knowledge. This is the reason that all AOAOs have boards rather than one person making decisions. So this newsletter went out to promote 3 out of 4 candidates. My name was left out. As then current board member, the newsletter was distributed without giving me the opportunity for review and to protest the election of irregularity of favoritism. I was deliberately excluded. I believe the proxy as a whole given to the board only serves the special interests of the majority board members. The role of the president is to protect and respect the opinions of the minority based on Robert's rules and common sense. And regarding condo owner on education of your board, I have attended since 2014 many of the education for directors. And I feel that my board members, which I made a motion on a separate minutes to ask them to attend Jane Sugimura's director's training, and they voted it down because you cannot mandate a board member to attend an educational class. We spend a lot of money on these educational fund in the condominiums. And yet they have a blatant display of not wanting to go and be trained. So all of this is the building block. I beg that you, Speaker Saiki, please reintroduce this bill again this year. And please, Senator Sharon Moriwaki, that it does get a scheduled hearing from the Senate Consumer Protection and Protection Committee. It has to. Because of all of this, I have filed a lawsuit against my association, and my representative is Terry Revere and Associates, because this is only the tip of the iceberg. I have worked really hard since 2009 to be part of my self-governance. I've attended meetings, I've attended educational programs, I've gone to the legislature for this one particular block that should be eliminated. No one, okay, well, anyway, please, thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator San Buenaventura, you have your hand up. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for calling on me. I'm a condo owner. I own a condo in Hilo as well as here in Honolulu. And I have seen the kind of abuses that I think that's being spoken about, especially when condo board members become heavy-handed with minor violations. So my question is, one, and I'm specifically, I'm gonna tell you, I specifically looked at this MSN News article on October 11th, where a 911 responder was sued by the condo board because he left his shoes outside the front door, and because he had respiratory illnesses. And despite showing the condo board his doctor's letter, the condo board sued him. And so even though there were already attorneys for the condo board that should have advised the condo board, what they were doing was against ADA and against the fair housing law, federal law, they still pursued it. And so the other condo members who were being told by the board that this couple was using up the fund in attorney's fees all started turning against the couple too. So here's what I wanted to find out. Okay, it's a long story, but I just want to let you know where I'm coming from. One was whether or not your proposed changes would help, would prevent the kind of what I call de minimis, because I'm a criminal defense attorney, which are basically minor violations from being overblown to the point where the attorney's fees are sucking up, condo fees that should have gone for other things like fixing up common areas rather than a condo board member's personal vendetta over these minor violations. Do you think that'll fix, your proposals will do that? And two, I want you folks to look also at the Florida law, condo laws, which basically allow for lawsuits against board members, okay? So that way, maybe the kind of personal vendetta that I'm talking about that maybe you folks may have experienced, will hopefully be relieved. So those are my two questions. Thank you.
So can I go first?
Go ahead.
Okay. My answer to you is this bill that was presented in 2019 will absolutely help. And the reason for that is I've never come forward as far as even going into filing against my association. But I really believe that if this was gone, I would still remain on the board and being given the opportunity for self-governance, because I'm very learned in the city and county building codes and all of these that I think I benefit all of the owners, not just myself. You know, I mean, I'm going through a lot of expense, not just for myself, but there's something behind it that drives me. But the point is, the last election, I had 25% of the owners that gave me their proxy. But because of the proxies as a whole given to the board, the other 3 members, candidates got 46 point something percent, 44 point something percent, 44 plus something percent. So you know that the division is being given to their preference to support the newsletter. I got 25% based on owners giving me their proxies. I hide nothing from the owners who give me their proxies. I'm upfront, clear, and transparent. So yes, if HB 347 and SB 724 is resubmitted for this 2022 legislature, I believe wholeheartedly that if it had passed in 2019, I would not be here talking to you. Not be. Thank you.
Yep, can we hear from Representative Saiki? Well, his hand is up. I don't see him anymore. Oh, there he is. Rep Saiki, would you like to also make your comment?
Thank you. I wanted to let Lourdes know that I did receive your email from this morning. And so I'll be working with Senator Moriwaki. I believe she's still on the Zoom, but Senator Moriwaki and I will review the email and we will get back to you. We know that you've been working on this issue for a while now, and we know that you're frustrated and need help. So we will be in contact with you. But thank you for raising it this morning, and thank you for your email this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lourdes.
I just want to add to that. So yes, Speaker Saiki and I will be working on it, but also I just wanted to follow up on the proxy that if in fact that the bill would eliminate proxies, what would happen to these people who are offshore if we were to get votes from everybody? And I think that's one of the issues of trying to have representation from everyone wherever they are. So I don't know if the bill does that, but we may want to look at that, and that might be something that Dale could answer. And if we have Dale's email and we have Lourdes yours, we might have a conversation as we go forward.
Right. Well, regarding overseas or non-local, we send them proxies. Associations send them proxies. So why not, as a suggestion, send them ballots instead? Anyway, Dale, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to mention that when I exercise, can you hear me?
Yes.
I exercise the state law to review election materials. All manner of obstacles are put in front of me by the property management company. I don't know why the state blocks property owners who are taxpayers from voting if they cannot attend the meeting in person. The proxy farm is like shadow boxing. It is funneled to a choke point controlled by the company that's rigging the election. They shouldn't even be involved in elections. I get calls from people out of state on the mail. I said, Dale, in my state, I can vote online and even by telephone, by answering security questions. I pay taxes in Hawaii too. Why can't I do it down there instead of just up here in Massachusetts? You know, I get calls from people on the mainland, but I'm not a legislator. I can't answer their questions. Thank you.
Senator Saiki, did you want to add something because your hand is up?
Just the one thing with Dale, he said that he had submitted something to Senator Kim. If he has that language, you might want to send it to us as well, to both Speaker Saiki and myself.
Will do.
Okay. And then Helen Wagner. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Representative Saiki.
I just lowered my hand, so I didn't have anything to add. Thank you.
Okay. Helen Wagner, where are you? You had your hand up. Did you want to add something?
Yes, with the Capitol being closed, or even all of the venues that can help the homeowners, we've had groups coming, especially like area was being developed, and all the different red line areas, that they're being overwhelmed by assessments. And we read about it, and we know that these retired people, a lot of them have sold their homes in order to help their children buy homes with the idea to retire comfortably in a condo, only to be faced with all the things that they were unaware of. For instance, in the bylaws, it says that if we sue, that we pay for it. And I have, as a board member, had gone to mediation, only to hear lawyers, condo lawyers, laugh with each other saying, what do we care? It's their money, cha-ching, cha-ching. I don't care if they take it to the Supreme Court, cha-ching, cha-ching. It just is such an abuse of that law going on. We have to open up the capital or the different, or the state, or the community, so that they have a voice, because they do not have a voice right now. The same with the ombudsman. We had to sue in order to find out what was going on, because the ombudsman couldn't even get into the care homes. We need an ombudsman for these people that are in retirement stages, that are being assessed outrageously and losing their homes, only for the developers to come in and build and knock down the buildings after they're out. And we all know what's going on. We've got to have a voice in front of the legislators. Right now, we're being silenced by people saying, because of the coronavirus, we can't go in. And there's no transparency going on at this point. We've got to reopen things so that the people have a voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I'm so sorry, but we have to go on to the next segment. There are some people waiting to present during this final segment. And, we'll have discussion after the third segment, this last segment. During this final segment, Samantha, Ian, and Caroline and Cullen will address their legislative priorities. Samantha Tradd is with Compassionate Choices. Ian Ross is the Public Policy and Advocacy Manager for the Hawaii chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. Carolyn Cadirao is Director of the state's Executive Office on Aging, and Cullen Hayashida is with the University of Hawaii. Sam, will you please start this segment, followed by Ian, then Caroline, then Cullen, and then we'll open the floor for discussion. Thank you.
Sure. Aloha, everyone. And thank you for your time today. Many of you are familiar with the Our Care, Our Choice Act. It was passed in 2018, went into effect in 2019, and it has helped over 60 people in Hawaii not have to suffer at the end of life. However, we found out in the first year that there are many people who are not able to access this option. In fact, Hawaii has the most difficult law of all the laws across the country that authorize medical aid in dying. And just a quick overview, this is an option for people who are imminently dying, people who don't want to suffer at the end of life. I think of Diane Rehm, who says everyone is one bad death away from supporting the option of medical aid in dying. And there's about 15 steps to access the law. And one of those steps is a 20-day waiting period. And what we've learned from all the authorized states, we have data. We have tremendous data on this, and I'll put some of the data we have in the chat box, but we also have data from Oregon dating back over 20 years. We found that the waiting period is really just a suffering period. Because of all the other steps in the process, we know that about 30% of patients who want this option who are dying died during the mandatory minimum waiting period. And while it sounds strange since, they died, so what's the problem? For the people who experience this, it's incredibly traumatizing. They're not able to ease their suffering at the end of life. They die in exactly the way that they did not want. And it can be a lot of grief for the patient's family and their medical providers, because they weren't able to help ease this patient's suffering. And at Compassionate Choices, I'll tell you, we get calls almost every week from people who are having trouble accessing the law. And the healthcare systems and hospices in Hawaii have been absolutely tremendous. There's so many medical providers who've really gone above and beyond to try to support patients. But what we found is that we have to amend the law. And this bill, the bill is SB 839. It's actually passed the Senate twice, but it keeps getting stuck in the House. And we have a bill that we're really hoping we can get through the House this year. It already passed the Senate last year. It's SB 839, and I'll put it in the chat box. And this bill also includes adding advanced practice registered nurses in the various roles to support patients in medical aid and dying. And again, it's a 15-step process. So I'm going to put that in the chat box. I know you're overwhelmed with information today, but I think, you know, the important things to remember about this bill is, first of all, there's no fiscal note attached. It's not going to cost the state any money. It's widely supported. We have tremendous data, and we're open to amendments. You know, the bill doesn't have to stay as is. But we do know that even amending the law, the waiting period from 20 days down to 15 days is not enough. In fact, California, New Mexico, and other states have a 48-hour waiting period now, and not a 15-day waiting period. So I will put this information in the chat box. I know we're running low on time, as well as my contact information. And if you have any questions, please let me know. And thank you again so much for your time today. Mahalo. Oh, and any questions before?
Thank you. All right. Is Ian here?
Ian's here.
Yes,
Ian's here. There we go.
Oh, I see Ian now. Okay, Ian, you're up.
You're muted, Ian.
Mind if I share my screen?
Go ahead.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present. One way I really like to always start out when I talk about Alzheimer's legislative priorities is a reminder that Alzheimer's disease is a public health crisis. It affects 29,000 individuals over the age of 65 in Hawaii, and 1 in 3 seniors who passes away does so with Alzheimer's or another dementia. It has a profound impact on the 51,000 family members who provide 81 million hours of unpaid care for their loved ones in Hawaii. And family members often suffer their own public health crises, their health crises, as well as a result because of the stress provided. There's a really high prevalence of chronic diseases, increased hospital bills, and many other negative health outcomes as a result. The New England Journal of Medicine, prior to the pandemic, reported that Alzheimer's had become the most expensive disease in America, with costs expected to continue to skyrocket. And another thing that's important to note is that caregivers are facing enormous challenges in fully rejoining the workforce during this pandemic. So there is a plan to help deal with this. It was developed in 2014. It was a large task force, 40 community and government stakeholders, and made another number of recommendations to find prevention and treatment by 2025 related to care quality, expanding support and training, respite, legal, financial, and safety services, increase awareness, data collection, and to monitor progress. I'm saddened to say that limited progress has been made so far. And I do find that hopefully the legislators with us today excluded, many legislators and government agencies don't know what's in this plan. The Executive Office on Aging is an important exception to all of this. And work is now being done for the next plan to take us beyond 2025. So my thought on all of this is we can't now wait after we put all this time into a plan. The plan's about to expire. We can't just wait till we draw another plan. The time to act is now. We have to continue to work on the recommendations that currently exist as we continue to propose and come up with new recommendations. So this is what the Alzheimer's Association has been doing. We've been playing a role in advocacy, letting people know about the effect of Alzheimer's and dementia. We were active since 2013 on that state plan. We've been holding annual advocacy days where we go and talk to legislators, drop off information, try to keep people having an understanding of this. There's a great 4-page summary of the plan, and that's something which we will often drop off at legislative offices. So we fought for an Alzheimer's state coordinator, which now has been included in the state budget. The position hasn't been filled yet, but we're really excited that we got this. We previously advocated for a pilot program to expand dementia screening for Native Hawaiians. This is something that wasn't successful, but we thought it was a really important way to raise a conversation. We had a really like a 6-bill plan for how to do a really big jump forward on dementia advocacy in 2020. Unfortunately, the pandemic put a lot of that on hold. 5 of our 6 bills had actually successfully crossed over, so we had a lot of momentum. Interestingly, the one bill which didn't cross over, the Alzheimer's and dementia training for first responders and adult protective services, we cut the adult protective services element, and it did actually pass as permissive language most recently during this session. So when we look at what we want to propose in terms of legislation, we go back to our own internal legislative goals that we're trying to push in every state across America right now. The 4 goal areas are increasing public awareness and early detection diagnosis, building a dementia-capable workforce, increasing access to home and community-based resources, and enhancing the quality of care in residential settings. And this is both somewhat wide in terms of scope, but we have subcategories that narrows it down a little further. Fortunately, I don't have time to go through each of those today, but this is one of those things we go back to. And because we're working on things that are similar to a lot of other states at the same time, states that get ahead of us in some of these areas then serve as models. So I have so many case studies, information and histories related to different types of passages of bills in other states across the country and how those have had impacts. So when we get to our ask this year, we're going to start out with one of the recommendations that I believe is coming out of the Executive Office of Aging and the Governor, and it's appropriating funding for Kupuna care and Kupuna caregivers. This is something which we're going to be following the lead of the Executive Office of Aging on. The Kupuna Caregivers Program wasn't properly funded by the legislature in 2020 or 2021. There's been some CARES funding and other federal support that's continued to keep it alive until now. Combining Kupuna care and Kupuna caregivers can allow for smoother administration and allow resources to be allocated more effectively. Additionally, this would lower the working hour requirement from 30 hours to 20 under the most recent draft I heard. You know, nothing's official until we see the release. This is something that we really strongly support. About 20% of women who are caregivers to people with Alzheimer's related dementia have to lower their working hours to part-time to about 20 hours. And that means many more are lowering below the current 30-hour threshold. We see this trend all across the country. We also know that people can get caught in a catch-22. If you're coming out and getting back to the workforce, coming out of this pandemic, it can be really hard to hit a 30-hour-a-week working mark consistently if you don't have care and support for your loved ones with dementia. And so in this way, we believe it can be really effective in actually removing that and getting people back to working, maybe even over that 30-hour mark, just because you are able to take that initial step forward and you don't have to be able to put that much time out of the home before you have support for someone with dementia. Additionally, I believe the current ask is going to be somewhere around the ballpark of 8.5 million. But again, we're following the lead of other organizations on this one. So we'll see the final language at the same time as everyone else does. Additionally, we're going to be requesting that permissive language that allows for dementia training for first responders become a requirement. That means police officers, firefighters, EMTs should receive regular training on how to identify and interact with people with dementia. We saw a lot of momentum after the state passed this bill and it was signed into law by the governor, where the Honolulu City Council actually passed a resolution urging the city administration to make this a requirement. And since then, we work with firefighters and HPD to make sure that training is high quality, and we've actually given them the training ourselves in some instances. So this is a huge amount of momentum. I suspect we're going to have all the stakeholders behind us this time, now that we've gone this far. The second one actually is no longer going to be built, but I included here anyway. I've been in communication with Adult Protective Services, and they weren't, supportive of a bill that requires them to have training, which they essentially already have. But the training is currently under management's discretion. There's no rule in any dementia training. Recognizing we're going to have another administration in the coming years, the thought that we have is we should lock this in with some sort of formal rule. Originally, we're leaning towards legislation, but right now we're actually talking to Adult Protective Services and appropriate directors to see if we can release a formal memo or some sort of rule change that would require this. Again, I don't think they would substantively change the training they're receiving now, but it will lock in that training to make sure that they always have that training going forward. Some other bills, we're coming to a late date, but I'm still having discussions with legislators to see if we can find ways to do one of these two things. Expanding Medicaid waivers. So there's Medicaid section 1115 waivers that enable family members to provide care to elderly loved ones, family members who have a range of chronic conditions. This can be really effective if you're just reimbursing caregivers because there's less necessity to go to expensive care settings. So this can reduce costs for the state and also allows Kupuna to age in at-home settings, which is often the strong preference. Many states see this as an important way of reducing costs, but it also keeps families together, which can be really important. I'm going to tell everyone I've been having a runaround. I've called Department of Health, Department of Human Services. I've talked to Medicaid departments. I've spent days just on the phone sending emails and received no response from anyone who's currently administering these programs. There's no reports on how much is currently spent or what the reimbursement rates are. I've gone through them with people who are in the know. So I'm trying to track this down to find out the current state. But basically, every state falls short of what could be the most effective in terms of proper reimbursement rates, is from my research. So I'm trying to find what the current rates are. So we might be able to propose an improvement or at least a resolution to look at what those could be. Next one is improving training pipelines. So we'd originally looked at geriatology, geriatrics as the main areas, but when you look at the shortfall for physicians and those in medicine, those are often some of the smallest shortfalls in across Hawaii. So while this is normally our goal across other states, we'd be most interested in looking at improving the pipelines for workforce development related to nursing fields. Those are where we have some of the biggest shortfalls right now in care settings, hospitals, et cetera. And by improving those areas, especially if they have training on how to work with our Kupuna most effectively, I think that could actually be the area where it'd be most effective. As I dig into this and see the extensiveness of like educational grants or waiving certain costs, I understand that the Alzheimer's Association might be a little bit of out of our wheelhouse. So I've been talking with HAH and other organizations to partner so we can make sure that we'll be an appropriate voice for this type of legislation and not necessarily find ourselves pushing against other stakeholders who've been working in this area for a long time. So I'm going to close out for all of our non-legislators here about how people can get involved with advocacy. We send emails out and text to a phone to action system, letting people know when it's a good time to testify, finding people who can testify in person or over video, whichever way we find ourselves, or attending advocacy days. And one of the best ways to get involved with that is if you grab your phone and text the words AIM Walk to 52886. Again, that's AIM Walk to 52886. It'll ask you for your email and your zip code right there via text. There's no link necessary. And once you respond to those, you'll be in our system and I'll be able to reach out to you when we want to talk to one of the legislators about the portions of Alzheimer's legislation, about our advocacy days, or when it's time to testify. Also, always feel free to email, call, text me. You can share your story with me. Tell me your idea for a law or a program. You might not get to it this coming year, but something which we can always look to into the future. Thank you very much. I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Ian. Caroline, you're next, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And Lila, thank you so much for allowing me to come back and summarize our legislative priorities for the Executive Office on Aging. Our first is a legislative package within the governor's legislative package, and that's a bill to amend the Kupuna Care and Kupuna Caregivers. Thank you, Ian. That was a good segue into what I was going to speak about. This bill is to incorporate the Kupuna Caregivers program within Kupuna Care. The combined program model will help to eliminate the silos that have been created by both programs, and having one program will really provide an array of seamless services and supports to meet the holistic needs of both the older adults and the caregivers. Our other two priorities is in our budget request. The first is to add $1.5 million to support the increase of the combined two programs that I just spoke about. And then our final ask is for the long-term care ombudsman. So we're asking for 2 full-time ombudsman positions for the long-term care ombudsman program. You heard John state that a study was done that it takes 1 ombudsman for every 2,000 long-term care beds. Hawaii has 13,000 beds spread across 4 countries divided by water. To meet that demand, we really do need 6 full-time equivalents, and we plan to build incrementally. Currently, we have 1 full-time state long-term care ombudsman, John, a volunteer coordinator, and and like he said, that's a staff of 2. And we have a 3rd position that's recently been established and is under recruitment. So these 2 additional positions would increase our full-time equivalent certified ombudsman to 4. And then we'd be able to increase our capacity by 200%. And that would allow us to have better presence in the community, which would lead to a better quality of life for our long-term care residents. Thank you, Lila.
Thank you, Caroline. All right, Cullen Hayashida, there you are.
Yes, okay, thank you. This has been a very productive and very interesting full meeting. In the interest of time, I just wanted to share 2 things, both of which are suggestions possibly for agenda items in the future. One has to do with a report that was underwritten by the State Department of Economic Development and Tourism by Dr. Andrew Mason at the East West Center on generational economy of Hawaii for the year 2030. It's based upon Dr. Mason's work with 80 nations throughout the world, and so he's gotten international notoriety for the methodology. Basically, trying to figure out what is happening or what will be happening in Hawaii when we look at Hawaii in terms of a generational economy of young people that are very dependent until they reach working age, and older population that are utilizing pensions and other sorts of income, and in that sense are not part of the working population per se oftentimes. And so basically what he projects is by 2030, there's going to be a massive, continuous massive deficit in excess of about $5 billion per year. I think that this is a report that that Kokua Council and the Kupuna Caucus needs to hear and directly from him. So that's one thing. I'd like to strongly suggest that he be invited to speak of his report. The second one has to do with Kapiolani Community College. As you may recall, I was once the director of the Kupuna Education Center there, and that was a center that I left in 2015. Annually, the center receives about 200,000 plus in general funds. But since the departure of the last director, maybe a year or 2 years ago, it's unclear in terms of what is going on as far as its contributions. possibly there's things that need to be done, for example, with dementia training, for example. The whole intent of the center was to work on family caregiver training, paraprofessional training, and active aging to try to engage older adults to remain healthy, engaged, and continuously contributing to throughout their lives. So I think that it's time for the Kupuna Caucus and the Kokua Council to invite KCC to provide a report with regards to the status of the Kupuna Education Center. That's all I have to say right now.
All right, thank you very much, Cullen. At this time, I'd like to open up for discussions. We've gone past our 1 o'clock deadline, but I understand there's quite a lot of conversations or discussions that people would like to have. And I'd also like to give our guests, all of you, an opportunity for closing statements. So whoever wants to go first, please let me know, raise your hand, raise the hand icon. Oh, okay. Okay. Any other comments that anyone would like to make at this time? If not, I thank all of you for your participation and look forward to working with all of you through 2022 on our legislative priorities. We invite you to join Kokua Council in our future programs or discuss these legislative concerns about healthcare, Kupuna care, the community, including affordable housing, homelessness, houselessness, homeowners association issues, including condominium issues, the 2022 election, and much more. Thank you very much for joining us. Oh, I see there's a condo owner had her hand up. Go ahead and add whatever you would like to condo owner.
I just would like to know how we follow up with the legislators who are on the Commerce Consumer Protection Committee, because this is something that is fairly detailed, the condo issue. And I think unless you've been through it for several years, as those of us who testified have, you really don't have experience with the details. And I'd love to have
I'm using it for protection right now.
the opportunity to follow up with legislators who are interested. So if we could
He doesn't have anything on it. I didn't do anything, however.
reach out to Kokua Council and make that line of communication available. That's what I would request.
All right. Is there any representative or senator who would like to respond to that?
I could respond to the Senate side. Senator Rosalyn Baker is the Consumer Protection Committee Chair. She lives on Maui, but she comes back and forth a lot. So if you have some of these issues, and especially your suggested proposals, that might be something where, I don't know, Lila or Rick, could put together a group that could entertain talking about the condos issues. I know that she is very concerned about that, and we have had her support in the past. So coming up with what the issue is and what possible proposals might be a way to also proceed.
And from the State House perspective, I just want to add that I'm not a member of the Commerce and Consumer Affairs Committee, but Representative Aaron Johansson is the chair. And similarly to Senator Moriwaki, I suggest you get a hold of him, be in communication with him. I know we've heard several bills in the condominium area in the past session, and so I'd encourage a dialogue with him. Well, and while I'm gabbing away, I want to mention that in response to a point that Ian Ross brought up about the critical shortage of healthcare workers, that I am working with the UH on drafting a bill. See, we don't have a shortage of students who want to become nurses. We have a shortage of nursing faculty to teach these students at our community colleges and at our four-year campuses. So I'm working on a bill to provide for repayments, similarly to what we do with physicians, to those nurses who decide to become faculty members, and provides for their repayments of their educational loans. So I I'm hopeful that we'd be able to get a lot of support for a measure like that, which directly responds to our healthcare needs. Thank you all.
Thank you, Representative. I see Bob Grossman in the, Bob, please go ahead.
Hi, a quick question. I know our time is short. Carolyn, on the Executive Office on Aging, given the need that John has eloquently documented, is there a conflict of interest within the department that it's not putting a bill that would have greater capacity of ombudsmans for the neighbor islands? I know years ago, before you started, it was within the office of the governor, and there was often better policy planning and carry through. But given the other Department of Health's functions for quality assurance, do you think this has diminished the request for a sensible bill to move forward as part of the governor's package?
We put in for the, and Bob, thank you for the question. We put in for the 2 full-time equivalents, kind of based on where we were at and where the state was with the current situation coming out of the pandemic. I won't dismiss that. Yes, we do need more ombudsmen, and I feel that you know, we'll incrementally build that. I am in discussions with our federal funders to see of ways of utilizing some additional federal funds to support John's programs. So working it out incrementally. And I think your last point was about whether or not, was it about John's, the ombudsman position or the program being within the Department of Health through the Executive Office on Aging? I may have misunderstood that part.
No, it was just that when it used to be in the governor's office, the policy development for the needs for, you know, that the executive office had was often better addressed because it was a governor's priority because it came out of his office. I think the fact it's taken 40 years to get ombudsman on the neighbor islands is it saddens me looking at the fact that we have such a strong senior population that has needs, and some of them are most vulnerable people are in small care homes, and we don't have the capacity for John to go as he outlined, and it was even worse during COVID. But to me, I can't imagine this is not a top priority for the state of Hawaii.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Would anyone else like to make a closing statement? If not, I thank you all very much for joining us. Happy Thanksgiving, and we look forward to working with all of you. Please stay well. Malama pono. Aloha. Thank you. I'll adjourn the meeting now.